In this video, I will show you how to get started carving into your plaster block as you begin to create your relief sculpture. So each table has a variety of tools in these little blue baskets. So they're labeled with the table number, so table 2, and they also have labeled how many of the metal dental tools they have versus how many of the wooden chisel tools they have, just so we can kind of keep track and make sure they're all getting back in there. So make sure you're not borrowing tools from another kit, just the one at your table. Okay, and anytime you're using a tool and you're finished with one, make sure to put it back in the basket, as they tend to roll around and they'll roll off onto the floor. And then we have to spend time finding those and picking those up. So the first thing, so I've sort of started carving mine a little bit here. And the first thing I suggest students do is to take one of the metal dental tools. So any of these will work pretty well. And so, okay, you have to decide like what areas are going to be lower and sort of what areas are going to be higher in the sculpture. So I've kind of decided, that some of these are going to be higher, and so that looks like I'm going to be lowering around these. And so what I've done around these little sort of S forms is I've simply just started kind of chiseling or just kind of scraping a little bit around them. So I could even take this into like a point and do that a little bit. And you have to periodically, like quite often, sort of dump the little plaster shavings and dust out of the block, because otherwise you're not going to see where your tool is. So you kind of have to do that fairly often. And some of the blocks are a little bit more soft, and some of them are a little bit more firm, depending on the mixture of plaster that was created when pouring these. But again, like this one here, like I think I'll probably have this one standing out. So I'm just going to sort of scratch around the outside. So that way I know, all right, I'm going to keep that one like taller than I am going to have the background. Okay, so I've decided that, so I'm just going to go around it. So that I know not to get confused. Because if you're doing, depending on what kind of design you have, like I have a symmetrical design in mine. Okay, so I want to have the things to be the same on both sides. Okay, so the dental tool is good to start out with. You get a lot of control. It's not going to take as much material away from it. So it's definitely good to sort of start out with. Okay, and of course you can kind of come in and you can clean up. It's a good tool for sort of cleaning things up as well. Okay, it's also good if you've got like little small areas. Like I decided that I want around this little shape here, this little form, to be lower. But then this, so this is going to be raised, this is going to be lowered, but I want this little part in here to be even lowered even further. So I'm just going to sort of come in here, kind of just draw around it, and again, make sure to dump that out each time. So I want to make those sort of nice corners there, so I'm not getting a circle or something like that. I just kind of have to keep working that back and forth, getting it in there. Okay. So periodically, like you have plaster dust, just sort of push it off kind of into a little pile or something. We'll also have clean-ish towels that we can kind of just dust block off a little bit more, so we can get kind of more of that out of there. And I can push that aside. Actually, having masks on helps us so we don't get this stuff, breathe this stuff, and also we're not tempted to blow the plaster around, which really kicks it up into the air. Okay. Now you can see when I did that with the cloth that I lost some of my drawing, but I can just kind of come back and redraw that on here. So that's kind of a really learning moment. So we need to make sure that sort of we're not dusting things off very much until we really start the carving process. So now in here, I've decided that I'm going to make this quite a bit lower. So I switched tools to one of the gouge tools. Okay. And these aren't super, super sharp. You know, they've been dulled over the years from using in the plaster. And again, we just kind of put our finger there. We can kind of gouge in. We can even kind of gouge in this way. Don't, you know, slam your hand down in like this because, of course, it's still precision. You want to try to get the most out of there. But, you know, when you're doing this and you're doing the gouge, start from like where you want to start away from. So I want to keep this edge here up. So I'm going to kind of start away from it and just kind of do little scoops. And kind of get that out of there. Sort of more little scoops. And I have to kind of pay attention, like how round is that other one? And this way I can get a lot more material out in a shorter amount of time. Now this tool is good for getting some depth. And then, of course, I got to decide, all right, I want these nice straight sides in there that kind of go straight down, so then I can take one of my dental tools and I can just start kind of scraping around in there. So now I've got a nice edge versus this kind of like roundy thing that I don't want. Okay, so I can kind of clean that up with that tool. Now some of the other tools are these ones that have kind of like a knife blade looking like thing. They're kind of good for taking off kind of larger areas, flattening things out. Because if you do that with the dental tool all the time, it's a small piece. You know, some of them are curved and do different things, but if you kind of go back and forth, a lot of times what will happen is it'll be uneven because it's not cutting off as enough a piece. So I could, you know, find out where my design started. I'm going to kind of go away from it. Always go away from the area in which you want to keep. Because if you go toward it, you could end up breaking off a little chunk that you don't want. Okay, and you have to decide, you know, how much of the material do I want to lower. But now, again, I just started out by going around this just so I can kind of tell, and I can remember where I decided to lower this. But it doesn't mean you're just going to lower it just around the shape. You got to lower the whole area. Okay, now in here, now our block started off with this sort of raised area just because it's sort of the bottom of this container, and it has these little plastic things that kind of went in, so that's what these are about. And sometimes the corners are broken off. So what I've actually done over here is I've actually lowered this from the original. So you could do that as well, and some of the wooden tools are a little bit more sturdy. You know, you can take it and just kind of pull it like this, and I'm, you know, taking off quite a bit of material. Just kind of pushing that kind of back and forth. Works pretty well. To get that sort of lower down there. And again, some of these blocks are softer than the other ones. Okay, and you could even, you know, maybe I want like a nice edge to that, so I want to, you know, make sure that that's a nice edge right there. Or maybe, you know, maybe I want to round it off a bit, so maybe I want to come in and just kind of tilt that back and forth until I have more of a rounded off corner instead of one like that. Okay. Now, periodically, you'll need to measure and see how far you have carved into your piece, because you've got to have over 1/4 of an inch, somewhere between 1/4 and a half, getting closer to 1/2 inch in some spaces within this, because we don't want to just have tiny little relief. We want to have things get down there more, so it has become interesting. And again, got to lower the whole, like, you know, if these rings are going to be up, then you want to lower all of this area around here. So I'm just going to measure by taking my tool and sort of putting it where it stops, and I'm going to put my thumb, kind of stop it where it hits that area right there. And then I'll grab a ruler and I'll line it up. So that is just about 1/4 of an inch right there. Okay, but now that measurement was from the original area. So this is actually going to be much lower than this original spot right here because I've been lowering this down. So this will have to get lowered and this will have to be lowered as well. But we've got, quite a bit of depth in here, that we can deal with. Now, if you make, a bunch of mistakes or you need to kind of fix some things, there is sandpaper that you can use. So I can like sort of take, off an area like, okay, I need to like fix all that. I'm going to just sort of erase a spot, and I can just kind of work like that. So it's mostly for erasing, removing pencil lines if you need to, not for just lowering huge amounts of the area because it's going to take a long time to do. And if the plaster gets sort of stuck in the grit of the sandpaper, we can just kind of flick it off like that so that you get the grit back. But that's sort of the basics on how to get started carving your plaster block.